You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Howard Dory.
And I'm Jess Dory, his wife, and we're the hosts of Plotting Through the Presidents,
A podcast that takes deep, irreverent dives into lesser-known stories about the early presidents, founders, and their families.
We explore myths, mysteries, scandals, and the wild personalities and intense relationships that help make America what it is today.
We dig into things like why John Adams and Alexander Hamilton hated each other so much,
The truth behind the legend that reporter Anne Royale ambushed John Quincy Adams for an interview while he was skinny dipping,
and the story of how Thomas Jefferson's obsession with making the finest wool in the world led to a tragic death on the White House lawn.
And there are so many more where that came from. Our listeners call our podcast well-researched, laugh-out-loud funny, insightful, and delightful. And our listeners are so astute.
They're so smart. We've got 3 bingeable seasons out now. Follow Plotting Through the Presidents now on all your podcast machines.
And find out more at plodpod.com.
Hi, friends. I'm Annie, and you're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. You just heard the promo for Plotting Through Presidents. Really brilliant title. I've recently started listening to this podcast as my presidential history is admittedly not the best. And you know my dad has made a personal request that we cover the way Garfield died. So I'm loving this podcast. Husband and wife team Howard and Jessica, they cover fascinating and lesser-known stories from the early presidents of the United States. Give them a listen. Tell them we said hi. Enjoy. Okay, so I know you're all wondering, where's Johanna? Normally, I'm here with Johanna, but we had a really tricky schedule this week, and so I'm really sorry to say it's just me. And today we're going to continue our conversation about the historic and haunted Hotel Del Coronado, or the Del, as it's often called. I'm going to get right into it because this is kind of a long episode, and I think Johanna is going to not like me very much. Okay. Hopefully you listened to last week's episode on the early history of Coronado Island and the fabulous Hotel Del, and I just have a lot to talk about this week. So, quick content warning. I'm going to be discussing and speculating on suicide and manners of suicide. I also want to be clear that I'm going to be reading from articles where there's a lot of outdated, insensitive, and problematic terminology. I may also be discussing some of the many deaths over the years at the hotel, which of course include drownings and other causes of death, natural causes, death by suicide, all manner of deaths of both children and adults. Not getting into any specifics though. And finally, I think just a really quick recap. All right. So on November 24th, 1892, a beautiful, elegant, well-educated woman with dark hair had the clerk sign her name on the hotel register, and her name was Lottie Bernard. She was from Detroit, she said, and had been traveling to Coronado with her brother, a Dr. Anderson, but they had had to part ways for some undisclosed reason, and she was expecting him to arrive any day now, any moment. In addition to missing her brother, she was missing her luggage. She said that she had tried to claim it, but because her brother had all of the claim stubs and she didn't exactly know where he was, she didn't have access to her things. She looked pale and pained, and over the next few days, while inquiring over the arrival of her brother each morning, the doctor, staff, and a few guests learned from speaking with her that she was suffering from stomach cancer and a bad heart and was not expected to live long. At the suggestion of a hotel employee, who was likely worried about how this woman would pay her bill, she sent a telegram to a Mr. Allen at the bank in Hamburg, Iowa. 5 days after she arrived, she went into San Diego and bought a snub-nosed revolver and some cartridges. The shop clerk demonstrated how to load the gun and how to pull the trigger. That morning, she had a bath drawn. She called for the bellboy, Harry, and asked him to dry her hair, which had gotten wet to the roots when she'd had a weak spell and had fallen into the tub. She was too weak to dry her own hair, so he assisted her with this task, and then he brought her a whiskey. He said her behavior seemed upset and anxious, and he'd last seen her on a glass-enclosed porch, staring out at the rough seas and worsening storm. Early the next morning, a hotel electrician found her lifeless body laying on the stairs leading to the beach. A gun was found inches from her outstretched right hand. Her body was taken to the undertaker's. An initial inquiry revealed that she was not Lottie A. Bernard of Detroit, Michigan, but who she was remained a mystery. The hotel received a telegram back from Mr. Allen in Hamburg, Iowa, guaranteeing her $25 in credit to use, and hotel staff immediately sent a message back letting him know that she had died of an apparent suicide, asking to please relay that information to her family so they might be in touch with the hotel to make arrangements. There was no word back. This is probably a good time to mention that in addition to the mystery of who this woman was, there are also conspiracy theories surrounding this case, and one of the main theories questions if this was a murder or a suicide. I figure I'll tell you that now so you can start to form your own thoughts as the story progresses. The very first time I mentioned this hotel was when I told Johanna about the death of Rebecca Zahow for the podcast, which occurred just around the corner from the hotel. And that is another of the very, very sad cases out there which involve a controversial and sometimes hotly debated cause of death. In this case, I really do feel pretty confident that it was a suicide. But this case it's a nightmare, honestly, to work out the details of. I'm going to do my best, but I just don't know. The other thing is that because they definitely felt it was a suicide at the time, there isn't any evidence, really. They didn't make a note of things in the way they might have. They didn't take photographs. They didn't investigate anything. And worst of all, there was no autopsy. So we don't know what she was really sick from. We're going to have to try to just work with what we have. So, that said, let's talk about what the coroner's inquest, which took place on Wednesday, November 30th, 1892, revealed, after her rooms had been searched. I've cut out a lot of superfluous information that I think I've already told you, and I'll of course link to the coroner's inquest so that you can read the rest of it if you'd like to see what's there. So, this is the coroner's inquest over the body of Lottie Anderson Bernard, deceased, before W.A. Sloan, Esquire, Justice of the Peace, and acting coroner. Now, real quick sidebar. If we're wondering why he is the acting coroner, it is because I found an article while I was searching for other articles that was dated in May 14th, 1892. The Selma Enterprise reports that Deputy Coroner Buck at San Diego is charged with robbing the dead. So, if we weren't sure why there was a deputy coroner on duty, it seems it's because the regular coroner had been robbing the dead. Okay, here we go. Wednesday, November 30th, 1892, San Diego, California. My name is B.F. Mertzman, physician and surgeon. Question: were you called to view the remains of the lady who is said to have been found dead at the Hotel Del Coronado? Answer: yes, sir, I was. About half an hour ago, at the undertaking establishment of Johnson, I made an examination of the remains and found a gunshot wound in the right temple region, just between the ear and the outer edge of the eyebrow, and about half an inch high up above that line drawn here. The ball entered into the brain, and that is the only opening I could find, no exit at all. Question: are you able to judge what occasioned the wound? Can you tell that? Answer: it was a gunshot. Question: are you able to judge as to the size of the ball? Answer: from the looks of it, I should say about 38 or 40. Question: you think it was a ball about the size of that? Handing pistol to witness. Answer: yes, sir, about the size of that. That would have been the gun that she purchased at the gun shop that day. Question: can you state what was the cause of death? Answer: yes, sir, probably internal hemorrhage. Question: by a juror. You never saw her before until you saw her a while ago? Answer: I had never seen her before. Question: by another juror. That ball passed through the head or just remained? Answer: just remained. It went in on the right side. That is all I could see. End quote. So some of those who think she was murdered believe that she purchased the gun for self-defense, and they mention that there was not a ballistics match. You see this often. You see them say, and anytime you say, you'll hear it said or you'll hear them say. I'm saying that because I don't know where they got that information. It's information I've seen, but I don't know what the source is, and I can't find any reliable source. I think what they're referring to is the physician who examined the body and said that he thought the size of the wound to her head was consistent with a 38 or a 40. But then the coroner hands him the snub-nosed gun found near her hand, and he confirms that yes, that weapon could have done it. I think that's the evidence of there being another gun that they're talking about because it was a 44, not a 40. I think that's what people are talking about when they say that the ballistics don't match. And so I don't think that's enough to say that that's not a match. There were really no ballistics done. It was just an eyeballing and everything was consistent. The other thing that I don't love in the I think she was murdered theory is she's out and about a lot. You know, if she's buying a gun for self-defense, then she's being seen in the lobbies of various hotels trying to find her brother an awful lot for somebody who would be terrified and in hiding. I just don't think it makes sense. And like I said, the gun that she bought, everything I read indicates that it would have definitely made a wound that was consistent with the injury that she had. Next up is her bellboy. He gives his name, occupation, says he was the last to see her on the veranda, and that she was sick since she had first arrived, and then it continues on. Question: did she send you for any medicines or anything? Answer: not by me. Let's see, today is the 30th. On the 26th, she sent me down to the drugstore for an empty pint bottle and a sponge, and that is the only thing she sent me for. She sent me to the bar twice. Question: what for? Answer: liquors. Sent me once for a glass of wine and once for a whiskey cocktail. That was day before yesterday. Question: what was her appearance and conduct? Did she appear to be suffering from pain? Answer: yes, sir, she appeared to be suffering a great deal. She groaned a great deal and slept most of the day. She would sleep a little while and then wake up and be groaning. She looked pale in the face. Question: she said she expected her brother. Did she say where from? Answer: no, sir, she told me where from, but I do not remember the place. Question: do you remember the state? Answer: no, sir. Question by a juror: what time was it when she sent you for that liquor? Answer: for the liquor? Question: yes. Answer: that was day before yesterday, in the morning, about 12 o'clock, somewhere just around 12 o'clock. Question: did you take the money for it? Answer: no, sir, I did not. I charged it to the room. End quote. So one of the things the coroner's inquest is known for is the fact that there were so many questions from jurors and also audience spectators. But I think, it seems to have all been done in a very orderly fashion. So it continues, and the next person they're talking to is Mr. Gomer. And so it says, quote, our Gomer sworn testifies as follows by Mr. Sloan. Question: what is your name? Answer: A.D. Gomer. I am engaged in the Hotel Del Coronado in the capacity of clerk. Question: have you seen the remains that are at the undertaking parlor? Yes. Do you identify them? Well, the only means, of course, that I have of knowing her name is the manner in which she was registered. Question: what name did she go by? Answer: Miss Lottie A. Bernard, Detroit. What do you know of her condition and circumstances during her stay at the hotel? Well, all I know is that the young man spoke to me of her arrival when I came to the office that evening, said there was rather a peculiar person came in this afternoon, and I asked him to point her out to me, and along about between 7 and 8 o'clock she came along, and he pointed her out, and there was nothing said until the next morning. She came to me asking my advice as to how she could get her baggage, which she claimed had been checked to San Diego, and the checks she said her brother had kept with him, and her brother had been called away from Orange, either to Los Angeles or Frisco. She did in fact not know. Question: did she speak of having come here to this place from Orange? Answer: that is the way her story began. Orange. She said Orange. Her brother was obliged to leave her, to remain there or go to Frisco, she didn't know which, and that she came on alone from Orange, and that her brother would be along that afternoon. That was the day after her arrival, and every day she inquired if her brother had arrived. She claimed that her brother was a Dr. Anderson, and that the initials were M.C. I am not sure about that. Question: what do you know of her circumstances financially, whether she was under financial embarrassment? Answer: After the boy came to the office Monday and asked for whiskey, I thought it necessary for someone to see her. The housekeeper had been trying to induce her to call the house physician. Rather, I insisted that the housekeeper should persuade her to call the house physician and see just what her condition was, and the housekeeper was unsuccessful. She kept telling the housekeeper that her brother was a physician and that it was not necessary to call a physician, but after this boy, who just testified, came to the office and asked for a whiskey and said that the lady had fell in the tub and wet her hair, I went up to her room myself and suggested first that we call the house physician. She was in bed then, covered up, and she was totally opposed to calling the physician. It was very gloomy, dreary sort of a day, and she was on the east side of the house without any fire, and I suggested that she have a fire and be made comfortable. She said no, she was very comfortable, as good as she could expect. She further told me that the doctors had given her up, that she had cancer of the stomach, and that her case was hopeless, but she told us in such an offhand way that it did not appear suspicious to me, and I endeavored to find out something about her identity. On the table in her room were some letters. I could not find out the contents of them without picking them up, and of course that was out of order. The only thing I saw on the table were some envelopes addressed to herself, and finally, after I found she was so much opposed to having the physician, I just put the question to her if she had got her baggage over, and then I asked her if she was supplied with funds, that in her condition she must necessarily need some funds, and she said yes. Then I said to her, wouldn't it be a good plan to telegraph your brother? She said, I don't know where to find my brother. I do not know whether he is at Los Angeles or at Orange or at Frisco. Then I said, is there no one else you could telegraph to for funds? And she suggested the name of G.L. Allen, Hamburg, Iowa. And at her suggestion, I wrote a telegram and sent it to Hamburg and left her then in the room. That was about 1 o'clock or 12:30 possibly, on Monday. And then the last time I saw her after that, the next time and last, was that evening, about somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock, she called at the office. Question. Now, what day was this? Answer. This was on Monday. She called at the office and inquired if there were any letters or telegrams for her. I said no, nothing, and she went about doing something, and that was the last I saw of her until yesterday morning. This man Dunn came to me and reported there was a corpse out on the ocean side of the house, and I immediately went out there and of course discovered that it was this woman. Question. You say you noticed letters addressed to her on her table? Answer. Just letters, envelopes, 2 or 3 possibly. Question. Did you notice the address? Answer. This same address. Lottie Bernard, Detroit. Question. Has there been any reply subsequently to the telegram? Answer. Yes. Yesterday morning, as soon as the office opened, a telegram came from Hamburg, Iowa, signed by some bank, but I neglected to bring that telegram with me and forgot the name of the bank, saying that they would honor her draft for $25 to show this to the bank. Then I immediately telegraphed to this same party that this person had suicided on the hotel grounds. Question. Have you received any reply to that? Answer. No. And advised them, at the suggestion of one of your assistants here, to telegraph the coroner. We have received no reply. It seems that sometime Monday afternoon, in relation to the papers, the memorandum, she rang her bell, and the bell was answered by the boy. She asked for a box of matches, but he said if she only wanted a few, he had a few in his pocket. She made the remark that she wished to burn some papers, so that may account for the disappearance of anything of the kind. By a juror. Question. Was there a fireplace in this room? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. All those envelopes were postmarked Hamburg, were they? Answer. No, I saw nothing on her table. She received no mail while she was there. The envelopes I saw were evidently written by herself and addressed to herself, Mrs. Lottie Bernard, without any street address, Detroit, for which I was trying, if possible, to find out who she was. Question. You say she said her brother's name was Anderson? Answer. Yes, Dr. Anderson, and she told me in conversation that he was a practicing physician in Indianapolis. Question. The house physician there, did he view the body at all? Answer. The house physician that day was off hunting. End quote. Okay. So now we know that there were some letters that she had, but she had burned them up in the fireplace without anybody being able to read them or see what was in their contents. I found it weird that he said that they were written by herself for herself. Is it possible that she knew a Charlotte or Lottie Anderson in Detroit and had just sort of assumed her identity, but they didn't really find anybody by that name, not in Detroit? Or did she just write letters like that to herself in order to give credence to the false name she was planning to give people? But when would he have seen her handwriting? Why did he say that he thought it was in her hand if the clerk had signed her in? I don't really understand where else he'd have seen her handwriting. Anyhow, the inquest continues. Quote, H.J. Stetson, sworn, testify as follows. Question. You are the deputy coroner, Mr. Stetson? Answer. Yes, sir. I received word to come to Coronado from the Coronado Hotel. I went over and found the body covered, found the lady lying there covered with a tarpaulin. The undertakers came over on the next boat and she was placed in the receiving box and brought to this city and taken to Johnson & Company's. Question. Did you form any judgment as to how long she might have been dead? Answer. She laid as though she might have been dead at least 6 hours, 6 or 7. She was stiff and cold. Question. You found the pistol there in the vicinity? Answer. Yes, sir. That pistol was laying on the next step, the stone steps that go down to the surf, and her hand rested on the lower edge of one, and it had fallen out onto the edge of the next one below, and there was blood around and underneath it. Question. Did you make any examination of the effects in her room? Answer. Yes, sir. I found the things that are right there. I found that valise, and on the table I found this envelope she had addressed. Just read it? Answer. Denman Thompson. Okay, so now he's describing an envelope that she had written on. And what is written on the envelope, or someone had written on? This is what was written on the envelope. So it says, Denman Thompson, the old homestead. And Frank is written 4 times. And then it says Lottie Anderson Bernard, Mrs. Lottie Bernard, Lottie Anderson Bernard, Detroit. And then on this paper, I found written, quote, I merely heard of that man. I do not know him. And then he also produced an invitation. And he says, here is an invitation to the Hotel Del Coronado, signed by Louise Leslie Carter and Lillian Russell. So Denman Thompson was a playwright who wrote a very popular play called The Old Homestead. The invitation to the hotel that was signed by Louise Leslie Carter and Lillian Russell, both of those were famous performers at that time, both of those women. The latter I know particularly from her work with Gilbert and Sullivan. Wondering where somebody would have gotten something like that, because it doesn't seem like there was an event where there would have been an invitation from the two of them created. So that's a little bit of a mystery of what that is exactly. All right, so back to the inquest. So the coroner's continuing. He's searching her rooms after her death. Question, what is the name on the handkerchief? Answer, L-T-T-L-E. I think it is. I cannot quite make it out, but the last name is Anderson. She had a purse on her person that contained $16.50, and there was a little ring in the purse, a plain ring, and the key to her valise. Produces the ring in the purse. Question. Nothing that would throw any identity upon where she was from. Answer. Not a thing. In the grate of the room, it looked like as though quite a package of papers had been burned. It was all in ashes, you might say. Whether she made them for a fire or what they might have been, you cannot tell, but they had all been burned. Then he's describing there's only one nightdress there, the bed wasn't slept in, and then what was found, quote, the hat lay on the mantel, a bottle, and a penknife. Yes, there was a considerable medicine in there, a bottle of camphor and a bottle of alcohol. Question. This large bottle here? Answer. That is brandy, I think, or alcohol and some quinine pills. Then there was a little piece of paper. I found a piece of paper that had been wrapped around a bottle of some kind. It says if it does not relieve you, you better send for the doctor. It was just signed druggist. It did not say where it was from. Question by a juror. Have you been to the baggage office to find out whether she had any there or not? Answer. No, I haven't been to the baggage, but she had no checks or anything put away to know. Question. She said her brother had the checks, but you do not know anything about whether she had baggage? Answer. No, sir, I do not know anything about it. I have not been. Question by Mr. Sloane. have you made any inquiry at all about it to any of the baggage men? Answer, Mr. Marks, no. Mr. Sloane, I believe, gentlemen, we have got all the testimony we can get. Unless there is some further inquiry you can suggest, I will submit the case to you. You can take the case and prepare your verdict. Here is a blank. You can fill it out in accordance with the facts. The jury, after deliberation, return to the verdict which is on file in this matter. End quote. So, there is a report in a few of the newspapers that found on her was a key that partly fit into a trunk lock at the station, But unless I'm wrong, a key that almost fits a lock is a key that does not fit a lock, right? That's just sensationalism journalism, unless I'm missing something about how locks work. Also, the Santa Fe station is the name of the station in San Diego. I am not getting into how long it took me to figure that one out. But yeah, apparently there were some trunks there. Were they hers? Her key almost fits. They're probably hers. Eventually, they're claimed by the owners, is kind of all the newspapers have to say. They don't get into any details, so there's that. Now we're going to be looking at an article that was in the San Francisco Examiner, San Francisco, California, 3rd of December, 1892, Saturday. Part of the reason I'm reading you so many newspaper articles for this case is it's really all we have. And there are a lot of people out there with really wildly diverse theories about who this woman was and what happened to her, but we're all pretty much going off of the exact same newspaper articles. So I just want to share with you what I've been finding because it's interesting and illuminating, and I don't know, I'll be curious to hear what you all think. Okay, so 3rd of December, 1892, San Francisco Examiner, San Francisco, California. Quote, a physician who has taken considerable interest in the case and who has examined the body expresses the opinion that the woman was suffering from the effects of a powerful medicine. Certain dark rings under her eyes he ascribes to the medicine taken and to the feelings of anxiety she must have suffered because of her desertion by her lover, for the doctor believes the man to whom she referred as her brother was the man who had deserted her in her hour of distress. Her suicide he ascribes to the despair she felt when convinced that the scoundrel had left her to her fate. It was not under a failure to get any advices from her brother that she appeared to have lost heart. On first reaching here, she inquired at the Brewster Hotel whether Mr. and Mrs. Anderson were staying here. On this account, it is believed that another woman may have been in the case, and that Anderson, who parted from her at Orange, may have been the man she expected to find at the Brewster Hotel with her rival. But all is conjecture, since she took the utmost pains to destroy every scrap of paper which might have aided in her identification. No post-mortem examination has been authorized, nor is it likely any will be made, for it is a plain case of suicide, whatever the motive might have been. A quarrel on the train. Some little light has been thrown upon the case by J.E. Jones of Boston, who was on the same train for the whole journey west of Denver to California with the young woman. He says he did not mention the fact, as he was averse to being called to testify before the coroner's jury, but that Mrs. Bernard was accompanied by a well-dressed gentleman as far as Orange, at which point they parted. Jones did not notice the couple particularly until after reaching this coast, where they attracted his attention and that of others in the car by high words and bitter quarreling. This they continued at intervals for some time. The quarrel ended with her asking her companion to forgive her, which she repeated several times, but he was obdurate and angry at length, leaving the train at Orange, the lady coming to San Diego. The stories told by Mrs. Barnard as to her identity, her companion, and her baggage are full of contradictions. To the chief clerk at the Hotel Del Coronado, she said her brother was suddenly called away by telegraph at Orange, and that he could be found either at the New Palace Hotel in San Francisco or the Nadu or Westminster at Los Angeles. That he sometimes stopped at one and sometimes the other. End quote. So that goes on. It talks about how contradictory her statements can be. They talk about how she certainly knows the names of lots of fine hotels. And it seems, of course, that a doctor thinks maybe she was pregnant and ruined. Ruined! Yeah. So was she pregnant and trying home remedies to induce an abortion, which was very, very common right through the colonial and Victorian era. You see ads for pills to help restore the natural cycle of your body, poison meant to end a pregnancy. Is it possible that she was inducing an abortion and not suffering from stomach cancer? Yeah, definitely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it was, like I said, common and legal in colonial America and only really became frowned upon and then illegal in the 1860s. But the point that is so important here is also the fact that there was no autopsy. And that is so frustrating because even at that time, first of all, they were all mad to do autopsies. They all wanted to do autopsies. So why didn't she get an autopsy? Because even then, they would have been able to tell the difference between stomach cancer and a pregnancy, from a uterine infection caused by an abortion to heart disease. Those are some pretty basic things that I think, most physicians at that time would have been comfortable diagnosing. The other aspect of this case is a really important one, and those are the statements by this man, Joseph Jones of Boston. He does in fact sign the register right after she signs the register. He claims that he had seen her arguing with a man for most of the journey from Colorado to the West Coast, to California. This testimony is pretty much taken as gospel. But should it be? Did he really witness the same woman fighting on the train? If he had this kind of really, I would argue, extremely important and valuable information, why didn't he agree to talk about what he knew while under oath? Did he just want to get in on the hot gossip in town? Because this really was hot gossip every single day. All of the newspapers were printing the latest. As frequently as they could, they were printing and correcting news literally as fast as they could print it on this case. All right. Now it's December 5th. And we hear from a mother in Detroit, and she would like a very detailed description, please, of the deceased woman because she is afraid that this may be her daughter, Lizzie Wylie. Lizzie was a factory girl at a bookbindery who had gotten too close to a married male supervisor coworker. They had an affair, and when it was discovered, they were both fired. I think Lizzie may have been pregnant, and the pair took off and had not been seen nor heard from. Their Lizzie had pierced ears, and the beautiful stranger's ears were not pierced, which, I'm going to be honest with you, was something people were absolutely going to overlook. They were like, yep, that's fine, that's definitely her. They were just really happy to have an ID, I think, on the corpse of this young woman who had been on display in the undertaker window, Thankfully for this family, they apparently soon received a letter from their Lizzie letting the family know that she was safe and I think living in Canada. There are some people who still believe that she was Lizzie Wylie, but I think it's unlikely. Then on December 8th, a family in Los Angeles reaches out to the sheriff, and they say that they had a woman working for them who was one of the best employees they'd ever had. She had left the day before Thanksgiving, and she should have been home by now. She'd left her belongings behind, taking only a small handbag, and they're very concerned that now she may have been the unidentified woman in Coronado. And so the police came, and they took the trunk, they took her belongings, and this is what they found. Los Angeles Herald, Los Angeles, California, 9th of December, 1892, page 5. Not the Coronado woman, but plenty of mystery about Mrs. Morgan. The contents of her trunk throw no light on the matter. Her photograph shows she did not resemble the Coronado Hotel suicide, her marriage certificate, other details. A trunk marked Mrs. Kate Morgan was taken to the Central Police Station yesterday from the house of L.A. Grant. Mr. Grant stated that Ms. Morgan had been employed in his house as a domestic and that on the evening of November 23rd, she left, stating she would return the next day. She took only a satchel, leaving her trunk of clothing. She did not return. The sudden disappearance was reported at the Central Police Station, but no clue was found of the missing woman. In her trunk was found a tin box marked Louisa Anderson. In the box were several photographs. One was that of a man aged about 50 years, with a full beard tinged with gray. Another was of a man aged about 35 years, black mustache, black hair, thick skull, and who looked something like a sporting character. This is perhaps the picture of her husband, who has deserted her. There were also photographs of two boys aged about 9 and 10 years, the photograph of a girl of about 2 years, and still another of a babe. In a paper was a lock of pretty blonde hair. On the paper was written, in rather coarse characters, Elizabeth A. Morgan's hair. On the reverse side of the photograph of the old gentleman, the name was scratched off, but the written word Visalia was left. On 2 other photographs, the names had been carefully erased. A letter was found in the box recommending Mrs. Morgan as an honorable and trustworthy woman and signed by W.J. Farmer, Hanford, California. The photograph of the old gentleman is no doubt that of Farmer, and he is perhaps her uncle. There were also found the cards of several ladies, together with their addresses, where no doubts she has been sent for work. A cabinet-sized photograph of Miss Morgan, found among the others, shows her to be a young woman of about 26 years of age, black eyes, large ears, rather large open face, and somewhat coarse features. Her mouth is rather large, and lips thick. The photograph contained not marks, and had evidently been taken recently. The photograph does not denote the appearance of a woman accustomed to stopping at first-class hotels as a guest, or one who wears lace shawls. Neither does it show her to be pretty, and the features are not those of a highly educated woman." End quote. So, it goes on, but I don't actually even know if this photograph is the same photograph that we know of as being Kate Morgan. I don't think it is. I think we're talking about 2 different photos. This case. Yeah. But some of it makes sense with her history, some of the stuff that was found. So let's talk about who Kate Logan was, because Logan was the name that Kate Morgan gave to that family. And I started an entire tree for these people, so here we go. Kathleen K. Farmer was born in Hamburg, Iowa in 1865, the second daughter of parents George and Elizabeth. Her older sister Mary died as a toddler in 1866, and then her mother died as well. I've seen some accounts that say her mom died in childbirth having her, but I don't believe that's true. I think she was maybe 2 or 3, but we know the mother did die when she was young. And her father sent her to live with her mother's parents, Joseph and Matilda Chandler. We can see her living with them when she is 3 years old in the census. She would grow up and marry Thomas E. Morgan on December 29, 1885. She was 19 and he was 25. On October 31st, 1886, Kate gave birth to a baby boy, who they named Thomas Edwin, but he sadly died a few days later on November 2nd. I've seen a lot of explanations. Some say that Kate Morgan left her husband Tom and ran away with his stepbrother, and that's who she was arguing with on the train. It seemed Tom did have stepbrothers and a stepsister, and their last name was Allen. He did have a stepbrother named George and a stepbrother named Albert Allen, and so some think that she ran off with one of them, and that he was a gambler and a card shark, and they worked this con on the trains together, and that's who she was waiting for after their fight, when presumably he got off a train in a huff. But if that's the case, I'm not sure how he's also at a bank in Iowa, presuming she's having them wire her family back in Iowa for money, right? For the G. Allen with the $25 at her disposal. But then when they interviewed him at the bank, he said he just happened to know a family by the name Bernard, and he assumed it was the wife in a bind, so he went ahead and authorized it. Nothing makes sense in this story, in any of it. It's all confusing. Do you know what I mean? Even when she wires for money, and his response is just, "Oh, I knew someone who had that last name." So I was like, yeah, if they need 25, that's fine. Would that have happened on the regular? I should think not, but was it just coincidence? I don't know. So Kate dies if she is the beautiful stranger, and Tom remarries in December of 1893, and he raises a family, and he becomes a postmaster. I can't see him being the card shark on a train guy. So there's some theories that her husband actually hunted her down and killed her, and I don't see it. I don't see it. I really don't. He did, like I said, have stepbrothers, and maybe Kate did run away with one of them sometime after the death of her baby. Did she have, well, we all know, right? The loss of a child can really make or break a relationship, and maybe theirs just couldn't survive it, All right. So the newspaper that was saying, "This trunk belongs to Kate Morgan," But Kate Morgan is not a suicide. And then the Los Angeles Times comes out on the 14th of December, 1892, page 9, The Coronado Suicide. Her identity as Katie Morgan fully established. Farmer's letter. W.F. Farmer, the Hanford man where Katie Morgan, the Coronado suicide, lived before she came to this city, has at last been heard from by Chief of Police Glass. The gentleman's letter reads as follows. December 12, 1892. Mr. J. M. Glass, Los Angeles. Dear Sir, your message received yesterday. I am more than surprised to hear of the tragedy. If it was Kate Morgan, you can rest assured that it was no case of suicide, for the reason that she had no cause for committing such an act. When she left me, I told her if she needed anything to send to me and I would assist her. Her people are well-to-do. Her husband, Thomas Morgan, has been traveling in the interest of some manufacturing company. His home is Hamburg, Iowa. I have known them for a good many years. She wrote me soon after her arrival in Los Angeles that she had secured a situation at a Mr. Whitney's, a banker on the west side. She had, when she left here, quite a sum of money. 1 large flat-top trunk, 2 leather satchels, and a lady's gold watch. She said she was going to deposit her money in a national bank for safekeeping. Her relatives are Henry Broomback and Thomas Morgan, Hamburg, Iowa. John W. Chandler, her grandfather, and John Samuela, Riverton, Iowa. I cannot help but think there is some mistake about its being Kate Morgan. She was troubled with rheumatism while here, and went to Los Angeles on account of its fine climate, with intention of living there if she liked it. You say you have positive evidence that it is her. What is it? She has a second cousin living in this county. She certainly would have written to someone if she contemplated the awful act. Yours most respectfully, W.F. Farmer. There is no doubt about the identity of the unfortunate girl. She answered the description of the Coronado suicide in every particular. That Katie Morgan intended to commit suicide when she left her employer, Mr. Grant, of this city on the 23rd of last month, there is no doubt, for she did everything in her power to conceal her identity. She defaced or destroyed her name on all her belongings. The name on her pictures had been cut off, and she overlooked nothing except her marriage certificate, and it was through this that her identity was established. There are several mysteries surrounding the case that may never be cleared up. If, as Mr. Farmer says, she had money when she left him, no one knows what became of it. The day before she left this city, she drew up or had signed some kind of legal paper, but the persons with whom she did business are not known. For some reason, they prefer to remain in the background. If she had money, she must have disposed of it in some manner on that day, and at her request, the matter is probably being kept a secret. The cause of her rash act is also a mystery. At any rate, she had only $16 when she killed herself at Coronado. That her family in Hamburg, Iowa, are satisfied with the identity there can be no doubt, for the body was buried in San Diego at their expense last Saturday. The following Associated Press dispatch from San Diego received yesterday says, the burial of the Coronado suicide of 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Kate Morgan, née Farmer, took place at 10 a.m. Reverend H.B. Restory, rector of St. Paul's, read the Episcopal burial service. Many women were in attendance. Prominent ladies sent flowers for the casket, but no one followed the remains to the cemetery. The grandfather of the deceased was J.W. Chandler of Riverton, Iowa. Okay, so many questions. So many questions, right? Depending on whose account you read, there are so many different explanations for events, and maybe they're all wrong. Maybe we still don't know who the beautiful stranger really was. After all, not a single person who knew her when she was alive came to identify her in death. As best as I can tell, the only thing they had to send to possible grieving families was that sketch and a written description. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe everyone's wrong. Maybe we still don't know who she is and what led her to such despair that she succumbed to her depression. Maybe that's why she haunts the place. She's angry that she's one of the most famous ghosts in America, and we don't really know as much as we think we do. Some theories believe very strongly that she did not shoot herself, but as I said before, had purchased the gun in self-defense. And I must say there is only one point that I must give to proponents of this argument, and that is, where were the rest of the cartridges that she purchased? We know that she purchased at least a few because she purchased 2 bits worth, right? They would have said, I gave her 1 bullet, They would have known if that was a thing. If she bought 2 bits worth of cartridges, then she had a few. They weren't anywhere in her room. They weren't in her pockets. I don't know. There are enough misprints and vague statements and rumors printed as facts in this case that, just the fact that we don't know what happened to the rest of the bullets, that's not actually enough for me to assume that she was murdered. I think that suicide was her cause of death, unfortunately, and I think, it's clear the shot would not have been heard because she was very close to the pounding surf. There was also a very big storm coming in. Many people believe that when she had the episode in the bath, where she had to call her bellboy Harry to come and dry her hair and was reported to be acting upset, many people think that that was a first suicide attempt. Drowning was a very popular method of suicide in the 1800s, and that was especially great if you could be made to look as if it was an accident, right? That would bring less stigma to the family, and that would also ensure payment of maybe a life insurance policy with a suicide clause. Interestingly, things we talked about the last time we were discussing Coronado and the Zahau death. But yeah, there are reasons you would want a suicide to look like a murder. I don't think that's what happened here. I think people are seeing a murder where I don't think there was one. So, where else are we? Was Mr. Jones from Boston, who wouldn't be sworn to testify for the coroner's inquest, was he even right? Was he telling the truth? Because here's the problem. If the woman had traveled with him from Denver, then she was not the Kate Morgan who went missing the day before Thanksgiving. Like, she wouldn't have traveled to Denver and then back in that space of time. It couldn't have been the same person. So, who did he see, if anyone? Or did he just make up a story? And if Kate Morgan had come from Iowa to work as a domestic in a town with better weather for arthritis, which I get it, I get it, how did she come to be dead at the hotel? They didn't report her, Kate, as being ill, which does that reinforce the suspicion of abortion? Maybe she had left her employer to tell a lover about a surprise pregnancy, found herself in a situation where she had to take care of an unwanted pregnancy, and it just all went wrong from there. Were the quinine, the camphor, the sponge, bottle, other items in the room, combined with the 2-hour hot bath, was that really an attempt to end a pregnancy? And then, when that failed, maybe to end her own life? It wouldn't be the first time a woman died rather than continuing on with a pregnancy. It wouldn't be the 1,000th time. Was the invitation that she had that was signed by the famous actresses of the time, was that just like a Hollywood souvenir? Like, was that something maybe that Kate just would have had because she was spending time in LA? You know what I mean? Did she know a Lottie Bernard? How did she get the handkerchief? Some people think the beautiful stranger is Lottie Bernard, but that was a really hard thread to follow, too. There was a death certificate issued for 24-year-old Kate Morgan on December 12th in Coronado. I have a photograph of it I'll share, and she is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery in San Diego. The thing that I think is the most striking about this case is no one cared enough to come and see her. No one cared enough to see for themselves that their young family member had died. And it wasn't because none of them could afford to come, you know? And it makes me sad. And you remember last week I mentioned that one of the times she was asking if her brother had been by, and they said no, and it was one of the last days, and she said, no one comes for me anymore. And I just find it ironic that the woman that no one would come for when she was alive, the woman that no one would come for when her body was in the undertaker's window on the street corner, she's now the ghost that everyone comes for. She's one of the most famous ghosts in America. But life at the Hotel Del, it moves on. So, in July of 1889, John D. Spreckles, who was already heavily invested in Coronado, bought Story's share of the property. Spreckles was responsible for the creation of a tent city, which is super cool. I'll post some photos. Basically just hundreds and hundreds of tents on the lawn leading down to where the boathouse was. They were all wired with electricity. They offered a much more affordable option so that people who couldn't afford the fancy schmancy Hotel Del could still afford to go and enjoy Coronado and everything it had to offer and enjoy how beautiful everything was. It was hugely successful. It was really cool. Oh, I don't think I mentioned before either that, did I mention that L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, the Hotel Del Coronado was his inspiration for the Emerald City, which I absolutely understand. And he also designed the crown-shaped chandeliers that hang in the crown room. Speaking of the crown room, in April of 1920, that is where Edward, Prince of Wales, he was visiting, and they say that that is when he first laid eyes on Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee that he would one day give up his throne in order to marry. Speaking of Nazi sympathizers, in 1927, Charles Lindbergh, he departed for New York from North Island, and from there he undertook the first transatlantic flight to Paris, which we covered in our episode on the kidnapping. Go way back in the beginning, yikes. Then in 1969, the absolutely fucking terrifying San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge was completed. That bridge is, no me gusta. It is, My husband loves it. I think it's terrifying, so take that what you will. But it made it much easier for people to get to the island. They didn't have to take the ferry anymore. In 1972, then President Richard Nixon held a state dinner for Mexican President Gustavo Diaz Ordaz. Among the 1,000 people in attendance at the event were former President and Mrs. Lyndon Johnson, California Governor and Mrs. Ronald Reagan, and Frank Sinatra and John Wayne. And that state dinner was the first one ever not held at the White House. So all of this and so much more is part of their on-site museum at the Del. It is located in the old ice house building. The hotel used to have an amazing ice-making facility. They have a great museum, amazing photographs, items from their very long, lustrous history, and they take the preservation of that history very seriously. They have a wonderful on-site historian. It's fantastic. And of course, I have to mention Marilyn Monroe stayed there while filming Some Like It Hot. She loved their vanilla custard with the meringue. It was her favorite dessert. Apparently, she had it every day. She's featured in one of their gift shops, and y'all know I love a gift shop. And listen, I don't know whether to be sad that they had such limited sizing left available in most items. Like, all they had was excess, extra small or extra large. So I don't know whether to be sad that I wasn't able to buy more stuff or just to be grateful at the hundreds I saved because of their low inventory, because they have really, really great stuff. Who can say? It's where I got one of your Christmas presents, which I haven't sent yet, but I definitely will be. And I got it in the shop called 1888. It's this sort of like funky, historical, Victorian. They have a whole Marilyn Monroe sort of area. And it's rumored that the ghost who haunts the Del may have a bit of a ghost feud with Marilyn, because it seems like items that have Marilyn's face on them are often found to have been flipped over or rearranged in the night. Items are also said to be literally flying off the shelves in the poltergeist sense, which seems to happen with some frequency in the shop. What else happens at the Del? Well, the beautiful stranger has been seen on a number of occasions. She's seen as the shadow of a black woman in a long gown with a hat. She's seen as someone who looks exactly like somebody who's just at the hotel for their Instagram, until all of a sudden they disappear between one blink and another. She's seen as a transparent, gray, fuzzy, smoky kind of ghost around the property. She's seen all over the hotel, but there are two rooms that seem particularly affected. One is the room that Kate stayed in when she was staying at the hotel, and this used to be room 302, but is now room 3327. In last week's Facebook album, I do have some of the original blueprints of the Hotel Del, so you can go and take a look and compare them to today's blueprints. So what happens in her room? The lights in the room flicker, the fan turns on and off, as does the television. Sometimes guests will feel a hand caress their cheek or a breeze when there's no place a breeze might come from. Sometimes your things are unpacked react in a less than helpful manner. But this room isn't the most haunted room, and they have investigated. To quote the Hotel Del website, quote, "In 1992, Hotel Del Coronado contracted with parapsychologist Christopher Chacon to conduct a confidential assessment of the ongoing anomalous phenomena reported throughout the resort. The continuous 24-hour-a-day, 12-month investigation involved an expansive environment scanning and monitoring with both on-site technology throughout the property. Additionally, 1,100 people were confidentially interviewed, consisting of hotel guests, day visitors, hotel employees, workers, and contractors. After almost 10,000 hours of continuous on-site assessment, a significant percentage of anomalous, paranormal phenomena were documented that could not be scientifically explained. Some of the recurring phenomena included moving chairs and furniture, disembodied shadows, opening and closing doors and windows, water faucets turning on and off, concentrations of extremely cold air, and disembodied voices and footsteps. Additionally, hundreds of incidents were documented of people, hotel guests, employees, etc., having all manner of experiences, talking to someone, hearing or smelling something that could not be scientifically detected. Among the variety of locations these experiences were documented includes the hotel's famously haunted rooms on the 3rd and 5th floor, which are among the most requested in the resort. Chacon returned to the Hotel Del Coronado on multiple occasions to conduct further assessments using different investigative models and approaches." End quote. So, thank you to Josh. We were able to squeeze into one of those tours, and we were able to watch some of the recorded video in that 5th floor room that they've been discussing. And we're going to be wanting to book this room in the future for sure. It's got 2 beds, so it's perfect. It used to be, back in the day, several small rooms where staff would have lodged, but I've watched the video with my very, very skeptical eyeballs, and some of it I can explain away. But not all of it. Some of it made the little hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But that's not all. Not only do staff and visitors see a woman in period clothing, they see children. They hear children playing, laughing. And over the years, plenty of children have died on the beach in Coronado. Are some of them still wandering the halls? In 1983, then Vice President George Bush was staying at the hotel. One of his Secret Service agents was in the haunted room on the 5th floor, and he called down to reception in the middle of the night about what sounded to him like a party in the room above his. The only problem was, there was no room above his. He asked to be moved. Did I experience anything paranormal at the Hotel Del? I did not, but I am willing to spend the rest of my life visiting this grand dam of Victorian seaside hotels because, damn, she is grand. So cheesy, but it's so true. Yeah, I'm willing to spend the rest of my life visiting this hotel to just make sure it's not haunted in the name of science. If you have the chance to go for the day, visit the Ice House Museum, sign up for a tour. Shout out to both Elaine and April, who led the 2 tours that we took. I honestly haven't even scratched the surface of some of the paranormal activity that was discussed and the places that we got to see. I don't want to ruin it so that when you go and take your own tour, you won't be disappointed. Yeah, we walked through a tunnel that connects the Ice House building with the basement of the Hotel Del, which is amazing because that power station was built to power the whole island, back in the day. Oh, so one of the tours that we took, the guide was standing outside the Oxford building, which was an old hotel. I didn't even have time to get into the Oxford building haunting stuff. But she's explaining how nobody there likes to work by themselves, and she's got her back to the front door, and she's telling all of us what's going on and what people have seen. And we can see somebody who's, coming down the stairs and exiting for the night. She did not know they were coming, and when they touched the door behind her, she jumped about 2 feet in the air. That was legitimate. That they do not like that building. But yeah, I'm just fascinated by this story. I can't believe that, after all of this, I don't know. I know the official story is that it was Kate Morgan. I just don't feel 100% sure that it was Kate Morgan. Yeah, this one's a head scratcher, but they're absolutely my something good. I have a favorite hotel in the whole world. It's the Hotel Del. It's my favorite. It's my something good. Check them out. Elaine and April led the 2 tours we took. They were amazing. Really, really good. Their museum is so much fun. They have dance cards and the logbook that Lottie signed and old photographs with all kinds of celebrities. You'll love it. All right. That's it. So if you need info on how to reach us, please go to our website, freshhellpodcast.com. Please leave us a review if you have a moment. You could also come join our Facebook group and tell us what you think happened. Who do you think the beautiful stranger was? Why are all of the sources so convoluted and complicated and difficult to unravel? Do you think it was Kate Morgan? Who do you think she was? You tell me. Explain it to me, because I don't know. Our Facebook group is called Fresh Hell Podcast. And until next week, I'm really sorry this one is so long, Johanna. Tell your dogs we said hi. Give people the benefit of the doubt. And be kind to yourself. Okay? And when you're going through hell, just keep going. Bye.